Dear friends, Operator Starsky here, and this is In Time. Guys, please subscribe to this channel because you can find all kinds of recent updates from Ukraine, analysis, and all kinds of interesting guests, not including myself, of course, but I will be present here as well. Hopefully, we'll see you soon.
Hello, everyone. My name is Nicholas Lamar Suter, and this is The Rundown. This is going to be an interesting show. They've all been interesting. With me here is 𝐒𝐸𝐿𝐴𝐸𝐿, and he will tell you, I think, that we were actually ready to go early, remarkably, and I had a stack of messages that I needed to go through anyway, so I started going through them, and somebody had pointed out something to me that I had missed earlier. I have found myself increasingly in the position where we title a show, we know what we're going to talk about, and then something even worse and bigger comes up in between when we scheduled the show and when we go live. So here's what we're going to do. We have other news, but it's complicated and we need to get into it, and quite honestly, we have not had the time. But it is worth bringing up and it is worth mentioning, and if it is how it appears, then it's extremely big, at least for political wonks and people who are concerned about what Trump is doing. It's an easy miss. It was brought to my attention by Winter Sunshine. We will discuss that in a few minutes. But it's not the topic of the show. It absolutely would be if I had had more time to digest it. That wasn't her fault. That was mine. She gave me plenty of notice on it, and was kind enough to tag me, and I missed it. So what we're going to do is we are going to talk about what this show is about. I anticipate that being about 30 to 45 minutes. And then we're going to talk about something else that is another rundown topic. Really would have been breaking news yesterday if we had caught it. I will remind people that one of the things that's happening now is that there's such an overload of information. It's very difficult to catch what's important and what's not, and it appears that in the continuing resolution for the budget, there may have been a rather extraordinary clause that we're going to need to discuss. I was looking at it before the show. It looks like she's right. It looks like she caught it. We're going to discuss it. We're going to discuss a number of things. Let's start with what the show is actually about. I'd be tempted to then cut the show and start a new one on the new, because it's that important, but since it's still, we'll get there. Wow. All right. So having just created a complete catastrophe of a mess of an opening, let me start with the Houthi have claimed that they have retaliated against the Truman Carrier Group. They've said that they've launched multiple missiles and a single drone against that group. I have no idea. 𝐒𝐸𝐿𝐴𝐸𝐿 is here and would probably be far more would absolutely be far more qualified to tell me the capabilities of defending itself against such an attack. Having said that, right now we can't actually confirm the attack. I suspect the attack actually did happen. I don't think the Houthi would claim it when it would be so easily disprovable. It would really not be very good for their morale. So I'm sure, I suspect it actually happened. I suspect, the kind of damage that they may or may not have done, I'm not overly concerned of at this point. We're letting you know because it is currently breaking news. It is in our Discord, and we are following it, that they have retaliated, but, there's a reason a carrier group exists. carriers are notoriously easy to sink, and so you have to have a group around them protecting them, and that group is usually extraordinarily strong. Is that safe to say, Xandring?
Yeah, though I would say add that a carrier or super carriers today aren't so easy to sink, even if they're caught completely alone. There's numerous anti-missile weapon systems on an aircraft carrier, plus it has its own entire flight crew to launch very, very deadly planes at you.
And I assume at this point they probably have a cap running 24/7 if they've just attacked another country.
Yeah, probably. And they would have, of course, they have all their screening elements. All the destroyers and stuff are going to be, clustered around it. Usually, they stage themselves between the carrier and whatever it is they're attacking or is attacking them, so that the all of the defensive weapon systems of we call them the small boys, are there to try and take out any kind of missile strikes. Because obviously, the carrier is the high-priced target. That's what you want to try and hit and take out. So, yeah, it's not so easy to try and take out an aircraft carrier.
All right, so we do know that they've claimed an attack. My suspicion is, again, that the claim is accurate. We don't have any confirmation, but my claim is that it's accurate. It's easily verifiable, and their own people would find out they're faking it, and it would demoralize them. So I suspect they have engaged the Truman Carrier Group. I don't anticipate that they've done any significant form of damage. We will learn more, and that will be on our Discord. We are following that. So that is the first story that we wanted to bring to you. We're following that now. Join us on the Discord to keep up with that and everything else. The second story, which is, I think, well past the tipping point now, but I think we're at the point you can no longer deny we have passed the tipping point. As we discussed yesterday, Donald Trump has invoked the Alien Enemies Act to allow him to deport people without due process. Now, why is this important? It's important for a number of reasons. What he has said is he only wants to deport criminals. Well, he's actually already got the power to deport criminals from other countries, even if they have a green card, even if they're here legally, he can deport them if they break a crime. And since being here illegally is a crime, being here undocumented is a crime, he can deport them. So he doesn't need any other authority. Nonetheless, he has invoked the Alien Enemies Act, saying that he needs this authority as an emergency war power. And that's important, and we're going to get into that in a minute because things are actually kind of starting to get a little scary. And I haven't said that yet. So I've seen everything. I've reported on everything. I haven't said that yet. We're going to get into that for the second half of the show. At any rate, he has invoked this war power. It's only been invoked twice before, once in World War I, the second time in World War II. In World War II, it was the justification for taking U.S. citizens, people who had been born and raised in the U.S., and putting them in internment camps because they had Japanese heritage. Now, the idea was, and this was challenged in court and won. This succeeded. The idea was, look, it's a war. You can have a broad definition of who an enemy is and who an alien is. So even though they were born in the U.S., because they had Japanese blood, you could actually assume they were an enemy and intern them. It essentially inverted the burden of proof, so that, and this was made clear, and this has been made clear in what Trump has said and done since. It inverted the burden of proof so that you had to prove that you weren't an enemy in order to stay out of an internment camp, and there was really no way to prove a negative in that sense. So that's one of the darker chapters in U.S. history. This is not a law that you should be proud of invoking. It has been invoked nonetheless. The ACLU, along with another organization, filed a TRO, a temporary restraining order, against the Trump administration, invoking this act and deporting anybody. Now, one of the things that he said was, and we talked about this, and what's kind of scary is this is what we've been talking about. If you've been following the show since the first day of the Trump administration, we covered all of his executive orders and the implications thereof from day one. And one of the things that we pointed out was that he was calling, on day one, he was calling a large number of cartels international terrorist organizations. And that language is very specific because that language empowers him, especially since 9/11, empowers him to do any number of things, including invade other countries to try to get at those organizations. He pointed out that in Mexico, some of the cartels had their own quasi-governments. That way, he could now invade Mexico under the auspices of trying to get another government, an illegal government, a terrorist government. This was the same authorization that was used to invade Afghanistan. So we pointed all of this out on day one. If you want to, you can go back, and we just, as we're seeing them, we're like, okay, this is what he's setting up. He is now employing this. What he is saying is that in Venezuela, there are multiple, like Tren de Agua and MS-13, multiple cartels, which he has designated international terrorist organizations. And you can hold terrorists without due process for long, throughout Guantanamo Bay. That declaration allows him to do a great many things. He has also said that they have, quote, invaded the United States, meaning we are presently under attack by international terrorist organizations. That is his claim. The ACLU has argued against his invoking of this law, not because of all the moral and ethical reasons, but because they're challenging the claim that the U.S. is being invaded. And I think that's the way to go, by the way, because under the moral and ethical reasons, the law was already challenged, and the law survived those challenges. Now, that was World War II, admittedly, but the U.S. Supreme Court seems to be willing to do whatever Trump wants. This is going to get very important very quickly, so stick with me. At any rate, the TRO was granted, and Trump was told not to deport any Venezuelans. Trump said in his executive order that he was only going to deport those who were members of this international terrorist organization, these drug cartels. But he tweeted thereafter that he was going to deport all Venezuelans. This is important because if they were members of these cartels, he wouldn't have needed the Alien Enemies Act. The only reason you need the Enemies Act is if you want to deport or detain people that you cannot prove or demonstrate are a threat, if you want to invert that burden of proof. That's the only reason. So in the very executive order where he says he's going to invoke this act, he says he's only going to go after ones who are breaking the law. But if that were true, then he would not need to invoke the act. Sure, because he can already do that. He can already deport ones breaking the law. So almost immediately after signing it, he says, I'm going to deport all Venezuelans, which the act will permit him to do. Because he just has to go up to a Venezuelan and say, can you prove that you're not a terrorist? No? Boom, on a plane, done. It removes due process. That's the entire point of the act. So, a temporary restraining order was granted against the Trump administration, saying that he could not deport anyone for 2 weeks until a judge could look at this and they could decide whether or not his use of this act is legal. He ignored the temporary restraining order and put 261 Venezuelans on airplanes and sent them to El Salvador. This is in complete violation of a judge's order that he had been served with and knew was in effect. The judge found out and issued an emergency order instructing the Trump administration to turn the planes around. Trump received that emergency order from the judge, ignored it, and the planes landed in El Salvador. El Salvador's president, Nayib Bukele, then tweeted, "Oopsie, too late." I'm not kidding. So, these detainees, 261, they are all Venezuelan. We know nothing about them. What we do know, well, that's not entirely true. We know, now the BBC is reporting that 238 of them were members of Tren de Agua de Argua, and 23 were members of MS-13. I don't know how they know that. The only way they could know that is if they were taken out of our prisons and deported. Having said that, and I say that because if they were in our prisons, they would have had due process already. There would have been a trial. They would have been found guilty, and then they're in prison. So the fact that the BBC is reporting that these people are in fact members of these organizations suggests to me that they all came from U.S. prisons, but there are a few things that suggest to me that they did not. Will get, I mean, some of them had like really long hair. I'm not convinced that they came from U.S. prisons. And again, if they came from U.S. prisons, then they've already broken the law and could already have been deported. So why are they being sent to El Salvador? And there's a couple possibilities. We'll get into that in a minute. At any rate, the first very big takeaway is that not only did Trump knowingly violate a judge's order, but the judge found out, notified him that he knew he was violating the order, and told him to stop, and Trump refused. This is now not the second time, but the second class in which he has done this. The first class was when it came to the Treasury Department. Trump has been using the power of the purse, which is exclusively Congress's. He has been freezing funds. He has been ordered, at least by now, I believe, 5 different judges to stop doing it. And he has been ordered by the Supreme Court to at least be far more judicious in doing it, and he has violated all of them. So he's repeatedly violated judges' orders and just does not care in the slightest. But you could, at a minimum, if you were being as charitable as possible, and if you're in denial about just how bad Trump is, you could say, well, yeah, but he figures because he runs the Treasury, which he does, he could make an argument for. But in this case now, he has violated a judge in regards to deporting, at one point, even possibly U.S. citizens, and invoking the Enemy Aliens Act, which again took U.S. citizens born and raised in the U.S. and put them in concentration camps. We did that, World War II, using this act. And it survived legal challenges then, and he's allowed to continue to use those precedents today. It'll be challenged again. What I read one article that said it faces an uphill battle. I don't think so. I mean, the law may face an uphill battle, but is Trump going to follow when a court says, no, you can't apply this to U.S. citizens? So he's using the current standing from World War II, which is he can apply it to basically anybody he wants to. All right. Going forward, what we have learned is that El Salvador's Terrorist Confinement Center, or 𝐒𝐸𝐜𝐡, is now being expanded. It can hold 40,000 prisoners. It is on the international list of human rights violations. What is it? It's I'm going to see if I can find I will get the official declaration, but it's widely criticized by human rights organizations for its mistreatment of criminals. It's huge. It can hold 40,000 people. And we have learned that the U.S. now has Marco Rubio has announced that we have an unprecedented and extraordinary migratory agreement, the most unprecedented and extraordinary migratory agreement anywhere in the world with El Salvador. They will take any of the deportees that we wish to have interred, and they will inter them there. They have said they will inter them for 1 year at a minimum, with a renewal period every year thereafter. Now, keep in mind, because these people are being held by the, or were taken by the Enemies Act, they were taken and sent there without due process. In one case we have, and it was, let me see if I can find, we know of at least one case already where a tourist was taken and detained by ICE and was getting ready to be deported before it found out they were legally here, before they could prove that they were legally here just visiting. They were a tourist. They didn't want to stay. They weren't trying to stay. And they were almost deported by ICE. And what's going to happen next is they're going to go to prison for a year in El Salvador because there's no right to due process anymore. That's the whole point of the act. So let me just real quick. I want to find okay. We have the article on that one. On, let's see, that was 𝐍𝐢𝐜𝐴𝐡 pointed that one out, and he put the article of that. That's also in our Discord. But I mean, if ICE is so yeah, tourism in the U.S. is about to go down. At any rate, President Bukele said the United States will pay a very low fee for each of them, but a high one for us. What he's referring to is the difference in the standard of living for each of these economies. The U.S. dollar pays for a lot more down there. So this is now essentially a privatized prison held in another country where U.S. law does not apply. We are paying for each prisoner, but the price we are paying is, I don't know what the difference in the economy is, but I would guess at a minimum 1 to 10 of what we'd be paying for if they were here. So now Trump can export almost any number of prisoners he wants to, up to 40,000, to this facility. Or you may say, well, Nick, this facility already has people there, so he can't put out 40,000, except because El Salvador is getting paid for these prisoners. That is incentive for them to relocate any current prisoners they have to make as much room as possible for U.S. prisoners, because they have to pay for each of their own prisoners, but they get paid for U.S. prisoners. So El Salvador is very interested in taking as many prisoners as we are willing to send them. All of them that we can tell right now, according to the president of El Salvador, will be kept in confinement for a minimum of 1 year while they are processed as to how dangerous they are. And then if it turns out that they didn't do anything, then they get released from what humanitarians are calling one of the worst prisons in the world. All right. Now that we have that joyous news, let me, $1 equals 8. Thank you, Xandring. That's part of the question is what can you buy with 8? So it's, yeah, so I'm curious to know how many dollars it costs to house. We'll get to that. We don't need to know that now, but thank you, Xandring. I appreciate that. So this by itself should be terrifying, and this is by far not the most terrifying piece of news that we're going to deliver today. Like I said, this show has 2 parts, but let's start with this. Xandring, welcome to the show.
Yeah, it's a nice, beautiful day. Little bit of tyranny going on.
Thank you for being patient as I go on with all of that. A Titan had said earlier on our Discord that this was a constitutional crisis. Now, the way I learned to use constitutional crisis is when you actually had 2 conflicting constitutional laws that were equally applicable, or when it somehow... in my college, we had a student council, And the student council at one point, something very bad happened. I forget what it was. And there was a rule that if you were to add any members, and it was in the constitution of the student council, any new members to the student council had to be approved by the student council. Makes sense. Okay. So a whole bunch of students got pissed, and they all quit the student council. They quit. They resigned. Well, it turned out that the quorum for the student council to meet wasn't based on a percentage of actual members, but was a set number, something like 35. And enough members quit the council that the number of active members of the student council fell below 35. Now you had a constitutional crisis because there was no way ever going forward to follow the rules and proceed, because you could never make any decisions because you couldn't have a quorum because there were fewer than 35 members. But you couldn't add members because you needed a quorum to add even one member to get it back up to 35. So basically, you would have to dissolve the student council and start all over again. I don't know how they resolved it, but any resolution would not be legal based on the Constitution because you had a conflict. You couldn't resolve the problem without having a meeting, but you couldn't have a meeting because of the fundamental problem. So that's how I learned of a constitutional crisis. Do you think we're in a constitutional crisis?
Yeah, I think we are. Oh, the good old days of going, hey, this is going to be a constitutional crisis because we have two different competing views on what the Constitution says or the constitutionality of these things. Except that, when you have a large portion of an entire branch of the federal government that decides we're not going to follow the Constitution, we're not going to abide by the checks and balances. The Constitution only works when the overwhelming majority of people believe in it and actually uphold it and abide by it. So if you have a branch of government that decides you're going to disregard these things, I would think that rightly qualifies as a constitutional or a constitutional crisis. So yeah, I would say that we are having several constitutional crises going on.
Any thoughts on what I have said? I don't think you were here when I discussed the Alien Enemies Act. I think you were in the live chat, though. I saw you there. So any thought on us invoking that act and exporting now? And again, the Venezuela, I don't know. A lot of what I've seen people say, I've seen multiple news agencies refer to these people differently. Some have said alleged members of the Venezuelan gang, yada, yada, yada. And that's all you need to invoke the Alien Enemies Act. So you can say, okay, I allege that you are an enemy of the U.S. Boom, you're done, unless you can prove otherwise. And then others, like the BBC, which is usually very reliable, says that they actually are members of these gangs. But I'm sitting there going, like, how would you know that unless they've already gone through the process, which would mean they were in U.S. jails, which means you could already have deported them anyway. So I don't get it. But what are your thoughts?
I can't believe that this has been upheld constitutionally. I mean, one of the founding principles of the United States is due process. It's like you cannot deprive people of their liberty, life, property, etc., without due process. And that was one of the founding pillars of the formation of the United States. It was to limit the government. The government had to make the case and prove before they could strip you of your rights. So I don't quite understand how in the hell this act ever withstood constitutional scrutiny to begin with. I guess they were thinking that it would only be applied in times of actual declared war. But yeah, I'm not a fan of this, and I guess it's a logical extension of what Trump did in his first term, where he decided to go after alleged Antifa leaders causing mayhem in Portland by just disappearing them off the streets. It's a logical extension of that, and of course, you're going to try and use it against people that the majority of Americans already dislike or don't agree with or would want gone anyway. It's really an easy thing to say, oh, well, we're going to target these vicious, horrible gangs like MS-13 and Trendy Aragua, and we're going to get rid of these super bad people, and we're going to dispense with any kind of due process for it at all. We're going to invoke this act and just go gather up the people that we claim are bad and just ship them off to an area that isn't particularly known for its robust and fair legal system. And we're going to pay them to take these people. So yeah, this is a natural progression of the straight up Pinochet shit that I was so pissed off about the first time Trump was president. So yeah, I'm not a happy camper about this. And I think that, and of course, the people who should be standing up against this that recognize, hey, wait a minute, you now literally have a tyrannical government that is going out and just abducting people, making claims, not having to justify or prove those claims in any kind of legal sense, and then just shipping them off to some third world prison. I shouldn't call El Salvador a third world country. They're really not. But yeah, it's terrible. This is, yeah, not good at all. I'm almost flabbergasted about this because the people who are supposed to be standing up for this are cheering it, and it bugs the ever living hell out of me.
Now I want to get into the other reason why this is so unbelievably fucking concerning, and it doesn't seem concerning. I actually ended up talking to my daughter about this earlier today because I wanted to see if she could figure it out. Because I was just like, why did he target Venezuelans? Because there's actually a very decent reason why. There's a good reason why he targeted Venezuelans. And it's not for any particular thing, except that nobody really cares about them. He targeted them because they were an easy target. He targeted them because if he has said he's going to deport Mexicans, he's not going after them right now in the same sense. He could, but he's not. But the reason is because he wants to start with a smaller group that nobody's really got a gripe with, but also has no real defense. The ACLU is the only group that's going to come to their defense. The Mexicans have several, Mexicans who are here legally have a number of groups, and even the ones who are undocumented have groups that will stand up for them. They have Americans that will stand up for them. Venezuelans, everyone's like, Venezuelans? Why are we targeting Venezuelans? Because they're the first, easiest, and smallest weather balloon, or just to float a balloon test and make sure he can get away with this.
Well, not only that, but
yeah.
Venezuela has been, derided in the media as essentially a failing state. It was held up as a socialist utopia, and then to watch it like literally collapse in front of your eyes. You could watch it collapse, and all of the refugees fleeing out of there. There's been a lot of targeted reporting about, this horrible gang is sending all of its members up here to start operating in the United States. So yeah, there's been a huge amount of negative press about just associated with Venezuela. So it's super easy to just go, oh, well, these people are terrible people out of Venezuela. And well, we all know how Venezuela's worked out. Wink, wink, nod, nod. It's, yeah, it does not surprise me that they're targeting something like Venezuela because of all of the setup prior about how bad Venezuela is.
I'm going to read something. Most people have heard it. We've all thought about it. I would like to challenge our audience to genuinely think about it because we are witnessing it. And I'd like to explain, because it's not just a poem or a saying, there's a story behind it. It goes as follows. First they came for the socialists, and I did not speak out because I was not a socialist. Then they came for the trade unionists, and I did not speak out because I was not a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews, and I did not speak out because I was not a Jew. Then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak for me. This poem was a confessional prose written by German Lutheran pastor Martin Niemöller. And he wrote it.
I was just waiting for you to pronounce that name.
Sorry. I decided I was going to go with the advice and just take one shot at it and move on. Now, it was the truth. He wasn't writing it because he was trying to be poetic. He wasn't writing it so much as a cautionary. It was a confession. He didn't stand up for any of those others, and then when he really needed the help, there was nobody left. He was a Lutheran pastor, and it was about the silent complicity of German intellectuals, especially the clergy, during the Nazi rise to power. Now, the reason I'm saying that is because, well, first they came for the Venezuelans. They're going for the Venezuelans because they're the easiest target, not because Trump hasn't been in power 100 days yet. Do you think he's going to stop here? Does anybody think he's going to stop here? Tomorrow he's going to say, oh, I accomplished all my goals. That's it. This is the crazy stuff we expect at the end of an administration when somebody's trying to sneak shit in under the door at the last minute. This is not the end. This is barely the beginning. He picked Venezuela because it's an easy target, not because it's the target he wants to hit. Next, if I had to guess, I'm going to say Brazilians. Why? Again, no significant advocacy group. Thank you. Yep, that was what. No significant advocacy group for Brazilians. No real complaints against Brazilians, however. So it's a step up from Venezuelans in that sense. There's a lot more of them, so it's harder to do, but there's still no advocacy group for them. So if he can deport the Venezuelans, which I think he's probably going to be successful at, next will be the Brazilians. It's also a little bit easier to, it's a bit different because they don't speak Spanish. And in the U.S., anyone who speaks Spanish is Mexican. That's the normal American thinking of things, unfortunately. I don't mean to... I mean, I know I'm casting dispersions, but that's in general, the average American off the streets, if they hear Spanish, like, oh, they're Mexican. Like, you do realize there are a lot of countries that speak Spanish, and a lot of them do come to this country. But at any rate, they speak Portuguese, so it's going to be a test of a larger demographic and one that's not so nearly... vulnerable as the Venezuelans, but that's it. I think he's going to go for Brazilians next, and I don't see any reason why that's not going to work. And then when he's done that, I think it's going to be anyone who speaks Spanish. He's going to say Mexicans, but you can paint anybody. It's like, where are you from? Yo soy de Guatemala. Oh, you're from Mexico. Great. You're getting kicked out of here. Eso es mi green card aquí. Es verdes. Sorry, I don't speak Mexican. Bye. This is the socialists from that poem. This is actually, we probably passed the socialists already, but Trump is going after the Venezuelans. And if you care about any fucking freedoms in this country, then you care about the Venezuelans, because he made it clear. The whole point of invoking that act is if they have a green card, if they're here legally, and eventually it'll be even if they're permanent residents, he will deport them all. That is his plan. Otherwise, there'd be no need for this. He didn't just open up a book, randomly put a finger in, and find this act that has only been used twice before in U.S. history and say, oh, let's use this act, especially when he already has the power to do what he says he wants to do. He picked this act for a very specific reason, and it's not so that he can deport people who are breaking the law, because he can already do that. And it's not so he can deport Venezuelans. I don't think he cares one way or another about deporting Venezuelans. He does care about deporting Mexicans. And I think he cares. Yeah, please.
This is how you normalize atrocious acts.
Yes, thank you. That was well put. You just put what I was trying to say. Thank you.
And that was what I was very angrily emoting about in that show that we did about the straight up dictatorial actions that Trump was taking in Portland in his first term. That was why I was angry. And I pointed it out then too. This is how you normalize these kinds of actions. So now you use it against people that are unpopular and the people cheer, and then you use it against less popular people and people aren't really concerned because, hey, we don't like those people really either. And it just goes down the list until suddenly they're coming after you. And the whole court system had all this time to try and challenge, and in this time they're actually challenging this, and he's ignoring them.
Yep.
So, I mean, at least thankfully there's some pushback, because there was no pushback against this really at all the first time he did this, which was in his first term. He did this. He just didn't actually completely disappear them. He did end up releasing them. So, yeah, this is should be concerning to absolutely everybody, and the population of the United States should be saying, "Hey, no, you cannot do this you cannot just dispense with due process." That is the pillar of our legal system.
I mean, in my view, this show that you're watching right now is probably one of the most important. I don't know. It's probably one of the biggest things that we've covered. And the reason is, while we've covered so many really terrible, bad things, this is the apex and confluence of all of them. He has now done what we already knew he was going to do, but we were waiting for, which is violated legal orders. It is actually it is qualitatively different to violate legal orders from one set of judges than to violate them from all sets of judges or from multiple sets of judges. So he has crossed that boundary. He has indicated that his objection to the first judges wasn't that they were pushing him around over the Treasury, over which he has control. Doesn't control the money, but he controls the Treasury. That was not his objection. We now know, we already knew, but it's now irrefutable. His objection was that they were judges, that they were telling him what to do. He does not recognize the authority of any judge anywhere on this planet to tell him what to do. That's pretty irrefutable at this point. So he's demonstrated that. He's demonstrated that he's willing to ignore both orders that say, look, we'll look at this. We'll give you a chance to argue it in front of a court. Just wait a couple of weeks. That are issued, and emergency orders in real time telling him to turn the planes around. He doesn't care. I'm kind of wondering, what is that judge thinking right now? He's just told someone, he's given them a direct order, and they've ignored him. And he can't do anything about it thanks to the Supreme Court that gave Trump basically blanket immunity from all judges. So,
and his cadre of supporters have been providing a huge amount of cover for this too, because any of these judges that try and stop Trump and what he's doing, who rightly say, hey, wait a minute, you can't just do this. You can't just take these people without due process and just ship them off to some other country, someplace, to a detention center, and then pay them to take them. It's like, no, you can't do that. And his cadre of supporters are going, oh, he's just a liberal activist judge, and he should be removed anyway. How dare you get into the interfere with the powers of the president? It's like, yeah, because those powers are supposed to be limited and enumerated. So it's even doubly disturbing that there's an entire swath of America that's covering for this and making excuses, literally attacking the judge that's trying to uphold due process and the law. It's like, I don't care if he's a liberal judge. I don't care who appointed him. I care about the law, and I care about due process. I care about curbing the power and authority of the federal government. I've always cared about that. I've always thought the federal government had too much power and it should be curbed a hell of a lot more than it is. So I find it even more troubling, and doubly troubling because the people who are supposed to be standing up against this are the people who are on his side. They're cheering this on. They're doing the work of going after in social media spaces all of these judges who are trying to stop and limit some of this stuff that's going on. Because not all the judges are even trying to completely stop it. They're saying, no, there's a process to this and you need to go through it.
Will no one rid me of this mad priest, or I think was the King Henry VIII, who didn't advocate for the murder of anyone, just said, will no one rid me of this? You know, it's like, will no one rid me of these evil judges who are breaking the law and who are activist liberal? Yeah. Oh dear. All right. So yeah. So I think that about covers the first half of this show. We're going to keep an eye on all of this. We are going to end up either. So we I don't know if anyone knows, you know, red teams or blue teams, what those are. Usually, if you have an idea that you're trying to build, you get a blue team together to put it together. And if you want to test and see how good that idea is, you send a red team against it. One of the complaints that when we had brought out all of the problems with Grok, including the fact that you could figure out how to weaponize uranium, just ask Grok, how do I weaponize uranium? And it's like, oh, here you go. Somebody pointed out that nobody had actually red teamed Grok. As soon as Grok was done, they should have taken their best programmers and said, we want you to destroy this thing. Give it a shot. And that's what Twitter should have done. You red team the living daylights out of it. So, you know, we try to have a couple of red and blue teams going at any given time, workshopping various scenarios. 4 out of 5 times we don't get much out of it. It's the one time that pays off and you guys get to hear about it. So we do a lot of interesting work on the Discord. I hope you will come down and check us out there and like, subscribe. And we've actually, I'm also going to, before we get to the second half of this, I know we've had a few chats and stuff like that. Let me get to those. They are very important. I'm doing this full time, so you know, I need to be able to keep the lights on, and people have been very generous in helping me do that. I appreciate that. It takes a lot. You'll notice we were just talking about how the BBC reports this versus how other people report this. My hope is one of the reasons you come to In Time is because we help aggregate and curate what you see in the media and break it down and get into the meaning behind it. We do that for the Ukraine war. We do that for any number of topics. We are also very lucky to have people like 𝐒𝐨𝐻𝐿𝐴𝐻𝐿 Commander McMillan and Titan, all of our mods, and the various people on the Discord who contribute. And we are largely run by the people who show up and decide that they want to participate and help create a program that hopefully helps people make sense of their world and empowers them to understand what's going on. So I thank you for that, and I thank everybody who donates in any way whatsoever, be it their time, money, or just click like and share. Sharing is actually one of the great ways. If you have a friend who's concerned about this and is like, I don't know what this means, hey, here's a show. Why don't you go check them out? If they like the show, you've done them a favor. You've done us a favor. Works out for everybody. So thank you for everybody. We will get to the second half of the show in just a minute. UTV and Ham gifted 1 In-Time membership. UTV and Ham, I've seen a lot. We hang in the same circles. We go to the same shows. Really appreciate your support. You're always there for us. Annette, $10. Wow. Annette, $10. I may be going a little too fast. Annette, $10. Thanks for keeping us informed, Nick. Thank you, Annette, and thank you for your continued support. It is always a pleasure to see you in the live chat, and we really do appreciate the donation. Thank you very much. Johnny Negregard, 22 Norwegian krona. Hello, time travelers. That's a good one. That's a new one. Time travelers. I think that's what our members are. I think our members are time travelers. I could be wrong. We may have to look into that, like naming them time travelers. You know, there's always every channel has. We'll have to think about that one. I like that. Thank you, Johnny. Slava Ukraina, Heroyam Slava. The Sinister Porpoise, $5.12. Trump doesn't read and knows little history. Who's the moron who told them about the 19th Century Act? I know. Tell me about it. That's going to be the Heritage Foundation. Sinister Porpoise was also correcting me and said that the law has actually been applied previously 3 times, and that there was another war in which it was applied. I was unaware of that. My understanding is that this is only the 3rd time it's been applied. But thank you for the correction, and thank you for the $5.12. Blonde Bombsheller, member for 6 months. Thanks for all your hard work, Nick and moderators. It is a tremendous amount of work for everybody. Titan works his tail off. All of our moderators work their tails off. Everybody on the Discord works their tails off. Dorito, in particular, has been doing a tremendous amount of work. So has Godzilla Music. A few others that I'm going to mention in a little bit. Sinister Porpoise has modded on occasion, especially as a backup mod. A lot of people do a lot of work, so it's thank you for appreciating it. And I think all of us enjoy it. I don't think anybody would do it if we didn't also enjoy it, but the recognition helps, so thank you for that. Blonde Bombsheller also gifted 10 in-time memberships. Blonde Bombsheller, thank you so much for that gift and for being a member. We really appreciate it. It's just and Blonde Bombsheller supports us in a number of ways as well, so it's not just she's always throwing out the links and talking to other channels about us, and has helped us land some of our guests as well. So thank you, Blonde Bombsheller, for all of that work and support. Orion Starfire, $10. Orion Starfire, that's how you pronounce the name. He's 𝐒𝐸𝐻𝐻𝐿 is French, and the motto of the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, it means, let us try. This before I donate, 𝐒𝐸𝐻𝐻𝐿. Let us try. Oh, well, yeah. Yeah. I said, may you live in interesting times, but somebody banned that phrase on this show. And Orion Starfire gifted 10 in-time memberships. Thank you so much, Orion, for that gift. We really do appreciate it.
I'm adopting a new.
Oh,
saying.
Please. What is it?
And you can thank Titan for this one.
Oh, great.
Now, instead of may you live in interesting times, I'm just going to start telling people I don't believe that position or the entire government should exist. That said, you'd be a fool not to pick me.
I like, okay, wait a minute. No, so it's time travelers would be members and time cops are the moderators. I think that's what it's going to be. All right. So I'd like to thank Winter Sunshine. She's a friend, and she is always giving me a lot of insights into a lot of things. We've had a couple of stories that have been sort of long lead stories that we've been working on. One of them on Russian interference, for which she provided a tremendous amount of material. One of the problems is we've gotten almost past the point of the relevance of that because we were dealing with so much here. So it's we were already shooting elements for a video on Russian interference, and it's like, I still think it has value, but we've got bigger fish to fry right now. She picked up on something, and I have not had as much due diligence as I would like to before normally discussing it, but she is usually really quite accurate, and what I've looked into it on this, it strikes me as accurate, so I think it's worth getting into. So, as everybody knows, there was a continuing resolution bill to help fund the United States government. which passed recently. Now, there's been a lot of talk, and we've discussed this. I think Chuck Schumer was in a very difficult position. My assumption of what Chuck Schumer did, because he hasn't really talked about it, and the answers that he's given are almost nonsensical, but why did Chuck Schumer support the bill? Essentially, I think it's because he's aware that we're about to have a serious financial crisis in this country, and the government is about to become so erratic and unreliable. Social Security is going to stop, all of these other things, or at least no, it's not going to stop completely, but it's going to stop being reliable. And he doesn't want any blame for it. And he knows that if the Democrats hold up the government in order to try to rein Trump in, Trump will just say, it isn't Doge's fault for cutting Social Security that Social Security stopped coming. It's, the Democrats' fault for trying to stop me from destroying the government. That's why the government's collapsing. That's the argument he's going to make. It sounds preposterous, but that's the argument he's going to make. So I think, agree or disagree with Chuck Schumer, it's a gamble either way. Whether you try to stop Trump and try to, and the other point that he made, which is a valid point, which is if you shut down the government, then Doge goes in and literally empties all of the friggin' offices. And because Doge isn't really a government agency, they can legally keep operating. So they can go in, change all the locks, change everything. Nobody's coming into work. There are no security guards to stop them. So one of his arguments, and it's actually a somewhat compelling one, is if you shut down the government, that actually accelerates Doge's work significantly. And everybody who's I forget what was the department that has actually had some success in stopping him so far, and it resulted in literal fisticuffs in the lobby as Doge agents tried to come in, and they said, "You're not coming in here. You're not federal office. You cannot come in here." Well, if that office is completely empty, if there's no security guards, and I mean, Elon Musk could literally go take a hammer, break a window, walk in. Who's going to arrest him? If he's arrested, he's pardoned 30 seconds later. So whether you like it or not, again, whether you agree or not with the Democrats passing that bill, the argument is Elon Musk's job becomes a lot easier if the government shuts down, and he may be right about that. So at any rate, what's done is done. The continuing resolution has passed. Government will stay open, I think, until September 30th, when they're going to have to figure out what to do. All right. Here's the thing. Section 4 of that continuing resolution, and if it's not already linked in the Discord, we'll link it. You should read it. The link is directly off of .gov website. Section 4 contains something that, to the best of my knowledge, I've never seen in any legislation before. It's a very small line. It seems reasonably innocuous. I'm going to read it. Section 4. Each day for the remainder of the first session of the 119th Congress shall not constitute a calendar day for the purposes of Section 202 of the National Emergencies Act, with a response to the joint resolution terminating a national emergency declared by the President on February 1st, 2025. Okay. What does that mean? That means it used to be that the commander-in-chief, the chief executive of this country, had essentially complete control of the U.S. armed forces. After, I think actually, it may have been before 9/11, but in sort of recent history, it was decided that no, he should only have 30 days, and then Congress has to approve whatever he's done. So if Trump decides he wants to invade England, he can do it. He can tell our entire military to attack England tomorrow. But he's only got 30 days. Then Congress can force the ships back. He has engaged a number of war powers and has declared an emergency. He declared a war, not a war crisis. I forget what it was. An economic act of war with the threat by Canada to shut off the electricity to roughly 13 states in the Union. Congress can revoke that within 30 days. I'm going to read to you the Section 4 again. Each day of the remainder of the 119th Congress shall not constitute a calendar day for the purposes of Section 202 of the National Emergencies Act with respect to a joint resolution terminating a national emergency declared by the President. What this means is Trump still has only 30 days, but it's not 30 calendar days. It's 30 days of 24 hours. Let's see how someone's going to need to do the math on that. What's 30? That's 740 hours. Sorry, 720 hours. Trump has 720 hours before Congress can stop him. But that's 720 hours of Congress being in session. So if Congress is in session for only 1 hour, normally that would count as a day because Congress came in for that day. Now it only counts as 1/24th of a day. This means that unless Congress stays in session for 720 hours, they no longer have the ability to terminate emergency powers that Trump grants himself. That's fucking staggering. That is essentially, and Winter Sunshine pointed this out, and I concur, that this is essentially Hitler's Enabling Act, Hitler's Enabling Act. It's the act that basically said that Hitler did not need the Reichstag's approval in order to deploy the military. This is absolutely stunning. It was hidden in the budget bill. It is now part of the law. The 30-day requirement that Congress must approve or decline any new powers given to the president has gone from 30 calendar days to 720 hours, and it has to be 720 hours of Congress being in session.
Which breaks down to, if Congress were to work a standard work week, 40 hours a week, that would take 126 days to reach that threshold.
100? How many?
126 days.
126 days. Okay, so that now gives
18 weeks.
From 30 days to
And just imagine if he decided that there was a disagreement between Congress, the houses of Congress going into recess, and he decided to just suspend Congress. They'll never reach that threshold.
He can suspend Congress at any time. We've discussed that before. For those of you who are new, unfortunately, as long as he does need the consent and acquiesce, he needs, if the Speaker of the House is willing to assist him, he needs the assistance of the Speaker of the House. The Speaker of the House must knowingly participate. Trump can, at any time, suspend Congress for as long as he chooses. It is part of Article 2, Section 3 of the U.S. Constitution. It's never been invoked before. It was not meant to be invoked in this way. Nonetheless, it can be. Trump has threatened to do it. all he needs is Speaker Johnson to agree. What Speaker Johnson would do would be send a bill suspending Congress for a period of time that the Senate would obviously not agree to. The Senate would disagree. Once there's a disagreement between the House and Senate, Trump can suspend both houses of Congress until such time as he sees fit to bring them back. So if they're suspended, he keeps his war powers indefinitely. It is absolutely fucking staggering. Now, as I said before, Winter Sunshine was good enough to send me this at 7 a.m. in the morning, and I was so busy working on other stuff, I didn't get a chance to see this until really right before we went live, and I very quickly read the bill, read the resolution, and checked in on everything I could do to fact check it, and it looks to me like she is correct. I think she's got it. We don't. I'm at a loss for words. We've had a few more super chats, so I'm gonna at least look at them in preparation to reading them. This is, I think, the first you've heard of it, 𝐶𝐸𝐿𝐴NDering. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, that's not worrisome at all. Anything to try and expand the length of time that he has unilateral power to be able to do something. It doesn't surprise me that things like that get put into these bills, because I'm not convinced that the majority of people actually read any of them. They just have their staffers say, "Oh, hey, this is what it's about. This is kind of what's in it." They don't actually go through and try and read them, and I'm not even sure that it would be possible for them to actually sit down and read everything. Half of it's written in a bunch of legalese, so you have no idea what it even really means without lawyers examining it. So it's another step down this. Wait, you can't do this, and I keep saying that so often.
I was being questioned about the Enabling Act. The Enabling Act, let's see, it was March 23rd, 1933. It actually granted him the approval to enact laws without the approval of Parliament, the Reichstag, or the President. He was at the time Chancellor. That is a difference. I don't think I think that the difference is trivial at this point. It's essentially assigning himself unlimited. I mean, if Trump is able to successfully give himself any wartime powers and suspend Congress, that means he is essentially writing the laws himself. If there's a difference between the two, in my view, it's trivial. And by trivial, I mean that in sort of the philosophical sense. I'm not trying to say it's. There are differences. I think in this context of what Trump is doing, it is an apt analogy. So let me put it that way. David, Orion Starfire became a member. Thank you so much for becoming a member. The memberships really help because it's continuing and we can rely on it. So thank you, and I'm glad that you appreciate the content enough to have decided to become a member. So thank you very much for that, Orion. Orion also donated $5. Everyone does not see a fascist regime everyone that does not see the fascist regime that is and has taken over the U.S. needs to fix themselves. Yeah. Titan. Damn it! I fact-checked 𝐶𝐸𝐿𝐴NDering, and he was right about the longest filibuster. I know. Welcome to my world. Fact-check 𝐶𝐸𝐿𝐴NDering is like, oh shit, he knows what he's talking about. All right.
I mean, to be fair, I knew that it was just over 24 hours, but I couldn't remember the exact number of minutes. I did have to look up what the minutes were. All I could remember was just over 24 hours.
David Marvin, $5. Thank you so much. Thanks for covering so many things that the mainstream media doesn't. That's really that's what we do. That's what we've been doing for 4 years. We look at all mainstream media, even Fox News, and we look at how they're covering things, what they're missing, what they're covering, and we try to curate that into something that's meaningful. So if you're here and if you're contributing, that means you agree with that, and you're supporting us, and we appreciate that support. Come join us on the Discord, and you can see what we do too. We're very proud of doing that. So I appreciate it, and thank you for acknowledging that. And I'm glad you find it helpful. Andorra 30 Canadian, and I need to refresh that real quick before. Yeah. So much substance here. Thank you so much. Yeah. Thank you, as Andrew. Yeah, I lost the screen just as that happened, but got it back. We try not to ever be a waste of your time, and we do sometimes tell jokes, and we try to be funny, and we try to keep things light sometimes, but we try never to be a waste of time. We don't have that show yet. We got a lot of in-time shows, but waste of time is not one of them. At any rate,
I have a waste of time. I made a belt of wristwatches. It was a waste of time. I want to. I don't know how bad Disney is now about copyright striking. I want us to get the clip from Star Wars Episode 3: Revenge of the Sith, where Senator Padme makes the statement, "So this is how democracy dies," to thunderous applause when they're in the Senate chamber.
I bet you we can do that.
Then we can just end the shows with that scene. Because that's what it feels like.
Just put it in the end of every.
Yeah. As we a cold outro, just put that up there. This is how democracy dies, to thundering applause. Because that's how I feel looking around at the more conservative side of the political divide, and all of these people that I do keep an eye on and watch. And they're cheering so much of this stuff and making so many excuses for this, and that scene is brought to mind so many times. It's like, so this is how democracy dies. This is how the U.S. is going to fall.
Send me a DM to remind me, and I'll see if I can snag the clip, and we'll put it in right after before the bumper out. We'll put it in so that at the end of every show, because I think it's worth. We've reached the point where it's worth that. So. This is what is called a rundown, and usually for a rundown, we try to keep the discussion light, and believe it or not, this discussion has been light. Both as Andrea and I have been restraining ourselves in our discussion because this is a rundown. This isn't a discussion. We're trying to run down where we are and what we see today. Part of that, as we end, I'm going to run down from the beginning. We have heard the Houthis have claimed that they have retaliated against the Truman Carrier Group. We do not know, as of this moment, of any damage done to the group. We do not believe any such retaliation could succeed in doing any kind of catastrophic damage. There will probably be some damage, maybe. I don't know. But we're following that. That'll be on the Discord. Meanwhile, Trump has used his newly acquired powers from the Alien Enemies Act to deport 261 Venezuelans. We have learned that he has created a deal with, which reminds me, actually, I think there was one thing I missed on that, so let me check. Yeah, with El Salvador. El Salvador is capable of housing at least 40,000 people in a what appears to be a supermax anti-terrorist prison facility. That facility has been cited for numerous human rights violations, and according to Human Rights Watch, El Salvador is, quote, worse than a third world country. That's a bold claim. At any rate, Secretary of State Marco Rubio has said that we have a wonderful migration deal with them. They will be taking all of our prisoners. We will pay them to house the prisoners. Each prisoner will be kept for a minimum of 1 year, where the detention status will be reviewed. Because this is under the Alien Enemies Act, we don't even need any evidence to deport someone and send them there. They need to prove that they are not an enemy. So the burden of proof has now been shifted. Trump has said in a tweet that he is going to deport all Venezuelans. That is every single Venezuelan in this country. And he is going to deport all of them. It appears he wants to deport all of them, whether they're here legally or not, to a prison in El Salvador. That is staggering. I think I can speak for all of us here at In Time when I say none of us think he's going to stop there. He's going to continue with other South American and Middle American countries. My personal suspicion is he's going to want to pick a bigger country next. Brazil is going to be reasonably high on the list for any number of reasons. It's a reasonably easy target, but there's a lot of them here. So we'll see. At any rate,
I think it's also possible that he may not go after specific nationalities next, but rather regions, and just say, you know, we're going to go after the rest of South Americans who are here illegally, or Central Americans. He's going to. I think he'll broaden the category to regions instead of just countries.
I think he will at some point. Whether that's next is a good question. We'll see. I think eventually he will broaden it to skin color. Eventually, if you are not Caucasian, you are going to get deported. I think that's the end game. And I think that is a justifiable hypothesis based on who he has around him, what their views are, what the views of their either countries of origin or their background, and or just their social media posts. That is not even including his supporters, many of whom are white nationalists or white supremacists. So my suspicion is at some point this goes to skin color. That is not unprecedented. Again, it was Americans of Japanese. You just had to look Japanese to be interred during World War II. So the precedent is already there. He has already said he is going to use that precedent. So come hell or high water, folks, this is going to end at skin color. If your skin is darker than toasted almond, you will be deported, and you will not have, in my view, this isn't, I suspect you concur?
Yes.
So in our view, if you have a dark skin color, you will be deported. If you're lucky, very lucky, you'll be deported to Mexico or Colombia. If you're kind of unlucky, you'll be deported to Guantanamo Bay. And if you're just like everybody else, you're probably going to end up in El Salvador. That, I think, is the end game for him. So as we talk about that lovely fact, he has defied a judge's order to not do this. He has also defied a judge's order to turn the planes around as he was doing it, and he is continuing to do this, and we can expect that El Salvador will take as many people as he is wanting to send because he is willing to pay them. Their country is absolutely corrupt. There is no democracy there. It's a dictatorship as well, and we are happy to pay that dictator. It's interesting, people who say we had to get rid of Saddam Hussein because he was a dictator are the same ones who were perfectly happy to work with the dictatorial royal house of Saud, and in this case, dictatorship in El Salvador, as long as we're getting cheap oil and getting rid of people who are not white. Anyways,
the incentives also exist for the El Salvador if they start running short of places to accept more, just conveniently disappearing a bunch of people and go, oh, we're not really at 39,000. We've only got 22,000, so we can take another 18,000 of your. And every time they start getting full up, I mean, we're paying them a not insignificant amount of money for El Salvador to take them. There's zero incentive for them to care for the well-being of any of these people, to just simply disappear them to make more room to get more money.
I don't know whether I am happy or disappointed in the fact that I didn't even remotely think of that. You are, of course, 100% correct. Not only no one said that, that's exactly what they're going to do. That's exactly what they're going to do. Joy. All right. So he is, let's see, he's ignoring another set of judges. By this point, we think the evidence is well beyond proven that it's not just some judges or whatever. He sees himself completely above the entire judiciary. So he sees himself above the judiciary. He sees himself as immune to that branch of government. He appears to be correct in as much as they can enforce their judgments against him. And he currently seems to have control over Congress. If he loses that control, we have already discussed a little bit on this stream and on previous streams, ways in which he could exercise complete control over them and shut them down if he chooses to. We believe that quote nuclear option he is fully aware of and will pull the trigger on if Congress should get uppity at any point. Having said that, we also have discovered, or again thanks to Winter Sunshine, who discovered in the latest budget bill a clause that appears to give Trump significantly greater time of basically unchecked power, extending the 30 days to, how many days was it? 100 and something?
126.
126 days.
That's assuming a standard 40-hour work week. It moves to 18 weeks.
Okay. And so they'd have to be pretty dedicated to do that. And again, he can shut them down from that. So it's basically unchecked power, because at that point he can keep. Here's a question: he's in charge of enforcing the law. What if he decides that every Democratic congressman is a danger to this country and has them all arrested? Who's going to stop him? The courts? So, and that's a bit of a scary thought, because then once again, Congress is, so anyone who opposes him at this point, he can arrest. And I don't know how they're going to get out of jail, because if a judge says get them out of jail, well, if they're in jail, maybe if he gets them into prison, or what if he just decides to send them to El Salvador?
I can't actually give, because of YouTube's restrictions, I can't actually give you the answer to that. The only thing that I can say is get involved in your own local and especially state politics, and make damn sure that you're pushing really hard to get candidates that align with the American values, that believe in the rule of law, believe in our Constitution, and get those people elected in place. Because if this keeps going the directions that it's going without anybody else being able to check this march of totalitarianism, then you're going to need your states.
Yep.
And you're going to need them somewhat soon.
Thank you for your reminder of that. Orion Starfire, another $10. This sounds a little vindictive, but I need to say this. I hope my cousin that voted for Trump has a Venezuelan wife and child with her is feeling like shit right now. Yeah, I get those vindictive feelings all the time. We don't have time for them, and we're all suffering. So as many of MAGA who can flip and say, oops, I made a mistake, it's like, okay, fine, great, you made a mistake. Now come on the right side and let's all fix this together. This is all hands on deck. But I understand the sentiment. Boy, do I understand the sentiment, Orion. Yeah, I get it. Sister Porpoise, Rubio overseas using AI to revoke student visas. I forgot about that. And at this point, even the student visa, it isn't going to help you, because with the Alien Enemies Act, even if you're here legally, he can now deport you. That's why he needs the act. If you've got a green card, student visa, it doesn't matter anymore. But you're right, the AI thing is just sort of like, well, the AI said he kind of looks like, resembles Saddam Hussein. Let's get him. Wow. All right, so that's it. That's the rundown for today. We are, of course, as always, going to be staying on it. There is a lot to stay on. We appreciate those of you who have contributed in whatever way. And by the way, for some of you, contribution is going to the Discord and watching learning and then maybe telling your friends and saying, hey, this is something I heard. What do you think about this? We are an educational show because we believe that education is a silver bullet. The more people that know what's going on and the more people who take an interest and try to absorb the reality of what's going on, the better for everybody. So thank you for joining us. Please come in our Discord and check it out. And we look forward to it's always like you see a show that's really like, it's a great show, but it's got terrible news. It's like, do you hit the like button or not? It's like, I don't like what they're talking about, but it was a good, they were, first of all, do please hit the like button. But I'm sitting there going like, I look forward to seeing you all next time. Yeah, if I'm the next time I'm seeing you, it's because something really bad has happened. So nonetheless, look forward to seeing you next time. Thank you all for joining us, and have a good rest of your weekend. Night all.